Imagine living on a quiet Tennessee farm in the early 1800s. The days are long but peaceful. The nights still and predictable. The Bell family lived this way for years. John Bell, the father, was a respected farmer. His wife Lucy was known for her kindness and faith. Together they had several children and a large, thriving farm in Red River, which later became Adams, Tennessee. They were the image of frontier success. But in 1817, that calm and prosperity began to crumble. What started as soft scratching noises in the walls soon became the most terrifying haunting in American history, a haunting so intense it reportedly killed a man. This is the story of the Bell Witch. It began quietly enough. John Bell was out in the fields one evening when he noticed a strange animal watching him from the edge of his property. It had the body of a dog, but the head of a rabbit. When he raised his gun and fired, the creature vanished into the thin Tennessee air. That night, the family heard knocks on the walls, faint but deliberate. They checked outside, but found no one. The sounds came again the next night, louder, moving from one wall to another, as if something invisible was walking around the house, knocking to be let in. At first, they tried to ignore it. The Bells were a devout family, used to hard work and hardship. They believed in the power of prayer, not superstition, but the sounds didn't stop. They grew more violent, chains dragging across the floor, thumps under the beds, gnawing noises like rats chewing through the walls. Yet, when John inspected the home, nothing was out of place. Then came the whispers. At first, the voice was faint, like a woman humming a tune just out of hearing range. Over time, it became clearer until it began to speak in full sentences. The entity called itself Kate. Sometimes she spoke in a deep man's voice, sometimes in the soft tones of a woman. She laughed, mocked, and sang hymns late into the night. She quoted scripture with perfect accuracy, but twisted its meaning into dark warnings. So what terrified the family most was her knowledge. She seemed to know every secret, every private thought, and every conversation. She would call out to the children by name before they entered a room. Soon, her presence turned violent. She pulled the children's hair and slapped their faces when no one else was near. The youngest daughter, Betsy Bell, became her primary target. The entity pinched her, scratched her, and left red marks across her skin. Neighbors witnessed these attacks. They saw Betsy's hair lifted by unseen hands. They heard the voice echoing from empty corners. Even outsiders couldn't deny that something strange was happening on the Bell farm. Word spread quickly. Curious locals came to see for themselves, expecting tricks or exaggerations. They left in shock. The entity performed for them, reciting prayers, mimicking voices, even predicting visitors before they arrived. Some said it sang hymns with the family, its invisible voice harmonizing perfectly. Others said it mocked John Bell relentlessly, calling him Old Jack and cursing him every chance it got. One of the strangest parts of the story is how personal the haunting was. It didn't act like a ghost trapped in a place. It acted like a conscious being with opinions, moods, and motives. It wasn't random, it was selective. To Lucy Bell, it was polite, sometimes even affectionate. It would sing to her and call her the most perfect woman to ever live. But to John, it was pure hatred. It swore it would kill him, and it repeated that threat for years. Visitors from far and wide came to witness the haunting. Among them was none other than General Andrew Jackson, the future president of the United States. According to local accounts, Jackson brought a team to investigate, armed and skeptical. When they reached the edge of the Bell property, the wheels of their wagon stopped turning as if locked by an unseen force. The horses refused to move. Then, a disembodied voice told Jackson that he could proceed, but only if he had the courage to face the witch. Jackson reportedly stayed one night listening to the voice mock his men, predicting their thoughts, and revealing their private fears. The next morning, Jackson left, declaring that he would rather fight the entire British Army again than spend another night with the Bell Witch. By this point, the haunting wasn't just a local curiosity, it had become a full-blown legend. Letters and journals described the events in shocking detail. What made the story stand out was its consistency. Multiple witnesses, from neighbors to preachers, recorded similar encounters. They heard the voice, saw objects move on their own, and watched as Betsy was tormented. The phenomenon was so well known that it even appeared in local court records. The more attention the haunting got, the stronger it seemed to become. It followed Betsy to school, whispering in her ear, pulling at her dress. It even disrupted her engagement to a young man named Joshua Gardner, whispering that he would die if he married her. Terrified and exhausted, Betsy eventually broke off the engagement. The entity seemed satisfied, laughing for days afterward. John Bell, meanwhile, was deteriorating. His health declined rapidly under the stress. He suffered from mysterious fits, swelling, and choking spells. The entity mocked him constantly, vowing that it would take his life. Family members said that the voice grew louder and more vicious whenever John was near. It called him a cheat and a hypocrite, saying he had wronged others in secret. Whether those accusations were true or not, no one could tell, but the attacks didn't stop. Imagine living like that, unable to sleep, hearing a voice that never leaves, knowing that no wall or prayer can protect you. The Bell family tried everything. They prayed, they fasted, they even moved Betsy to friends' houses, but the entity followed her wherever she went. They brought in ministers, skeptics, and even witch hunters, but no one could explain it. The strange thing was how articulate and intelligent the voice was. It wasn't random noise. It carried on conversations, answered questions, and told stories. It claimed to know the past and the future. It even discussed the afterlife in chilling detail, saying that it came from a world beyond. Some thought it was a demon. Others said it was the spirit of a wronged woman. Some even believed it was the ghost of a Native American, displaced by the Bell's farm. No one ever agreed on what Kate truly was. What's clear is that this haunting was unlike anything seen before or since. It blended physical violence with psychological terror. It broke down the Bell family one by one until their lives revolved around the invisible force in their home. For over 4 years, they lived in constant fear-watched, taunted, and attacked by something no one could touch. The Bell Witch wasn't content to just frighten them. It wanted domination. It wanted attention. It wanted power over their minds. That's what made it more terrifying than any ghost story. It wasn't satisfied until it became the center of their world, and by then, escape was impossible. As you'll see in the next part, this haunting would escalate to a horrifying end, one that still defies explanation to this day. The Bell Witch didn't just scare her victims, she destroyed them, piece by piece, until her curse claimed its final victim. If you're drawn to stories where the line between legend and reality disappears, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Belmoze, where we uncover the most chilling truths behind history's darkest tales. In the still air of rural Tennessee in the early 1800s, something began to stir that defied every law of nature. The Bell family's farmhouse stood quietly among rolling fields and oak trees, a picture of peace and ordinary life. But when the whispers started, no one could trace their source. They came from the corners of rooms, from empty hallways, and from the shadows that stretched long after sundown. At first, it was faint, barely more than the sound of a breeze slipping through the cracks. Then the whispers grew into words, and the words grew into voices. It wasn't tea. Long before the Bell family realized they were sharing their home with something that not only saw them, but spoke to them. What made the Bell Witch unlike any haunting before it was its voice. Most spirits stayed hidden, knocking on walls, moving small objects, showing up in dreams or cold spots. But this one didn't hide. It wanted to be heard. It wanted to be known. It called itself Kate. It spoke clearly, fluently, and with a tone that carried a kind of dark amusement. The family could hear it sing hymns, quote scripture, mock their conversations, and even call each of them by name. Sometimes it spoke like a woman, other times like a man, and occasionally in several voices at once, as if an unseen crowd had gathered to taunt them. To the Bells, this wasn't just a ghost. It was a presence that understood them intimately and used that knowledge like a weapon. The first time John Bell heard it, he thought one of his children was playing a trick. Late one night, as he sat near the hearth, he heard his name whispered behind him. When he turned, there was no one there. The whisper came again, closer this time, almost inside his ear. John, he stood up, searching the corners of the room, the hallway beyond, the yard outside. Nothing. But then, clear as day, a woman's voice said, "You can't hide from me." From that night on, the haunting took on a personality of its own. The family stopped thinking of it as a ghost. They began speaking about it as her. Kate didn't just speak to the Bells, she interacted with their lives in ways that made escape impossible. She could recite private conversations that happened miles away from the house. She would hum lullabies to the children in their sleep, switching to mocking laughter when they woke crying. She quoted the Bible with perfect accuracy, but twisted the meaning of verses to terrify them. Neighbors who came to investigate claimed to hear her too. Some swore they had entire conversations with the voice, only to realize later that they'd been standing alone the whole time. The witch was articulate, witty, and cruel. It was as if she had studied human fear and decided to play with it. She saved her worst hatred for John Bell. While she teased, and sometimes even charmed the others, she tormented him relentlessly. When he tried to pray, she shouted over him, reciting his prayers in a mocking tone. When he ate, she would knock the food from his hands or curse the bread in his mouth. At night, she whispered his name until he couldn't sleep. He'd wake covered in scratches and bruises, with no idea how they'd appeared. Once, his daughter Betsy saw his chair lift slightly off the ground and drop as if something invisible had shoved it. When she screamed, the voice laughed and said, "He deserves it." Every act, every word, carried an intelligence behind it. This wasn't random. It was deliberate punishment. Witnesses outside the Bell home began to experience it too. A neighbor named James Johnson visited, hoping to prove the family's claims false. He stayed overnight, and just after midnight, the bed beneath him began to shake. The sheets were ripped away, and a disembodied voice whispered, "James, you shouldn't have come." He left at dawn, pale and trembling, convinced that whatever haunted the Bells wasn't human. Soon, the story spread. Farmers, travelers, and even ministers came from miles around to witness the phenomenon. Many left shaken, insisting they'd heard the same clear, taunting voice of Kate. The witch seemed to enjoy the attention. The more people who came, the louder and bolder she became. She sang church hymns loudly at night, her voice echoing across the fields. She would shift tones mid-song from sweet and soft to deep and menacing, as though multiple people were singing through one throat. On some nights, the voice would drift outside the house, circling it like a predator, calling out to each family member in turn. "Good night, Betsy," she'd whisper. "Sleep well, John. I'll see you before dawn." The effect was psychological torture. The Bells never knew when or how she'd strike next, but they knew she was always listening. Kate's strange ability to communicate made her presence undeniable. It wasn't the kind of haunting that could be dismissed as imagination or rumor. People heard her speak in public gatherings. Once, during a church service, her voice joined in the singing loud, clear and perfectly in tune, yet coming from nowhere. The congregation froze when the preacher demanded the unseen singer reveal herself. She laughed and said, "You preach well, but you don't live it." The entire room erupted into chaos. Some fled in terror, others fell to their knees. The story of the talking would spread beyond Tennessee, drawing the curiosity of skeptics and believers alike. What terrified people most wasn't just her voice, but her intelligence. She answered questions, recalled details, and responded to new information as if she were part of the room. When skeptics tried to test her by asking secret questions only close family would know she answered everyone correctly. Once, a visitor asked what his mother was doing at that exact moment back home. The witch paused, then said, "She's sewing your shirt by the window, the blue one." Days later, when the man returned home, his mother confirmed it. Stories like these made it impossible to separate rumor from fact. Was this a demon, a restless soul, or something else entirely? Something that could move through minds and memories like a parasite. The more Kate spoke, the more she seemed to feed on fear. Her voice grew stronger during arguments, prayers, and nights of despair. Some thought she gained power from emotional chaos. Others believed she was bound to John Bell. Sins whatever they might have been, and that her hatred was a form of divine punishment. Regardless of the cause, the haunting deepened. John Bell's health began to fail. He suffered trembling fits, blindness in one eye, and paralysis in his mouth. The witch took credit for every symptom. "He will die by my hand," she said more than once, her voice cold and sure. The family pleaded with her, but she only laughed, mocking their desperation. The haunting reached such infamy that even General Andrew Jackson, future President of the United States, visited the Bell home. He came with a group of soldiers, skeptical but curious. When their wagon approached the property, the wheels locked up in the dirt as if an invisible force held them. The horses refused to move. Then a voice rang out, calm and sharp. "You may go on now, General. I've been expecting you." The wheels turned freely. Inside the house, Jackson and his men listened as the voice spoke from empty air, predicting their actions, repeating their words, and laughing at their fear. One soldier later claimed he felt a slap across his face from an unseen hand. Jackson reportedly said, "I'd rather fight the British again than face the Bell Witch another night." But for the Bell family, there was no escape. Night after night, the witch's voice filled their home. Sometimes she sang softly, almost beautifully, as if to lull them into a false sense of peace. Other times, she screamed for hours, cursing John Bell's name until morning. The line between life and nightmare blurred. Every sound in the dark could be her. Every whisper of wind could be her laughter. The family lived not just with a haunting, but with an intelligent, speaking tormentor one, who understood their minds better than any living human could. And while her voice could vanish as suddenly as it appeared, the fear she planted lingered long after the sound faded. By the year 1819, the story of the Bell Witch had spread far beyond the quiet farmland of Tennessee. Travelers carried tales of the strange voice that mocked, sang, and cursed the Bell family. Newspapers picked up the whispers, and soon, even men of power and influence were talking about it. Among them was General Andrew Jackson, a war hero whose reputation for courage and skepticism made him one of the most formidable men of his time. Jackson had heard stories of the haunting from soldiers and friends. He dismissed most ghost tales as superstition, but the consistency of the Bell Witch accounts caught his attention. He wanted to see it for himself. At that time, Jackson was already a national figure, a man who had faced the British Army and won. He was known for his iron will and fearlessness. When he heard of a ghost that could outsmart preachers and terrorize an entire family, he reportedly laughed. According to local accounts, Jackson said, "I'll put an end to this nonsense." So, he gathered a small group of men, some soldiers, and a wagon loaded with supplies and set out for Adams, Tennessee. His goal was simple: prove the haunting was a hoax, or uncover the trick behind it. The road to the Bell farm was quiet, stretching across fields and forests. But as Jackson's group drew near, the horses began to act strangely. The animals slowed, then stopped altogether. The men cracked their whips, shouted, and even pushed at the wheels, but the wagon wouldn't move another inch. It was as if an invisible wall had appeared across the path. Frustrated, Jackson ordered his men to inspect the wheels. They were fine. The axles weren't broken, and the ground wasn't soft. Then, without warning, a cold voice broke through the still air. It said, "You may go on now, General Jackson. I'll see you tonight." The men froze. Jackson, who had faced gunfire and cannon blasts, felt something he hadn't felt before Rooney's. Moments later, the horses started moving again, as if nothing had happened. When the group arrived at the Bell home, they were greeted politely by John Bell and his family. They were used to visitors. By this point, the Bell farm had become a strange kind of attraction, a place people visited to test their courage or to witness the unexplained. Jackson's men unloaded their supplies and began setting up camp, half expecting a prank or performance. But as the night fell, their skepticism began to fade. According to witnesses, the men sat by the fire inside the house, talking in low voices about the stories they'd heard. They joked about ghosts and claimed they'd expose whoever was behind it before morning. Then, without warning, the voice spoke again. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, sharp and mocking. "Gentlemen," it said, "I hope you are well rested, for we have a long night ahead." The fire flickered violently. One of Jackson's soldiers, a self-proclaimed witch tamer, stood up and boasted that he could handle any spirit. He reached into his coat and pulled out a pistol with a silver bullet, saying that the weapon would stop the witch instantly. The voice laughed a cold, sharp sound that filled the room. Then, according to the accounts, the man screamed. His body was lifted, struck several times by an invisible force, and thrown across the room. When he hit the ground, the voice mocked him, saying, "How's that for a witch tamer?" Jackson's men wanted to flee, but he told them to stay. He was determined to uncover the truth. The voice continued to torment them, calling each man by name, recounting private details of their lives that no stranger could know. It mocked their fears, repeated their secret thoughts, and mimicked their voices perfectly. The soldiers sat frozen, realizing this was no prank. Throughout the night, the haunting intensified. The house groaned as if under pressure. Objects shifted on their own. The voice alternated between laughter and hymns. One witness later said it was like listening to someone sing a church song in one breath and curse God in the next. The contradictions were what made it so disturbing. It wasn't mindless chaos. It was deliberate, intelligent, and cruel. Jackson reportedly stayed calm but pale. He was a man who believed in discipline, but this was something beyond control. At one point, he addressed the voice directly, asking who it was and what it wanted. The reply was chilling. "I am what was, what is, and what shall always be. You shall find out soon enough." No one slept that night. The next morning, Jackson prepared to continue his stay. But before breakfast, the voice spoke again. "General, you can go now. I will visit your men in Nashville soon." That was enough. Jackson ordered the wagons packed and left without argument. Years later, according to several retellings, he supposedly told friends that he'd rather fight the entire British Army again than spend another night with the Bell Witch. What's remarkable about this event is how consistently it was described. While skeptics argue the story was exaggerated over time, there are records from multiple witnesses, including some of Jackson's soldiers, who confirmed that something deeply unsettling happened on that farm. The Bell family never claimed to see Jackson's group attack directly, but the story became a permanent part of the legend. It wasn't just a ghost story anymore, it was a national tale, one that tied the supernatural to one of America's most famous historical figures. This part of the story raises an unsettling question. If even a hardened general like Jackson couldn't face it, what kind of force had the Bell family been enduring for years? To them, the haunting wasn't just a spectacle. It was their daily reality. Every knock on the wall, every whisper in the dark was a reminder that the entity was always present, watching and waiting. It's important to understand how such events would have felt in that time period. The early 19th century was an age of faith and fear, where the unknown was often interpreted through religion. People believed that spirits could be divine punishments or demonic forces. The Bell Witch fit neatly into both ideas, a test of faith and a punishment for some hidden sin. The community viewed the haunting not as a random event, but as something deeply moral and cosmic. Jackson's visit amplified the legend. The story of the brave general being humbled by a ghost spread across the frontier. It added a new layer to the tale, a sense that even the powerful and fearless could be shaken by forces beyond human understanding. For skeptics, it became an example of mass hysteria and folklore feeding itself. For believers, it was proof that the Bell Witch was real, intelligent, and unstoppable. Imagine living through that as the Bell family. Their haunting was now public knowledge. Strangers visited their property not to help, but to witness their suffering. Their pain had become entertainment. And through it all, the voice never stopped. It reminded them daily that no one, not even a general, could save them. This is what made the Bell Witch so terrifying. It didn't hide in shadows. It wanted to be known. It thrived on attention and fear, using both to strengthen its hold over its victims. The visit from Andrew Jackson didn't weaken, it only confirmed its power. As the haunting continued, its focus on John Bell grew darker. The entity's threats became specific. It no longer just taunted, it promised his death. And the more people came to witness, the stronger the voice became, as if the collective fear of hundreds was feeding it. This wasn't just a haunting anymore, it was a siege. And in the next part, the Bell Witch would fulfill its deadly promise, ending the life of the man it hated most. If you're fascinated by stories where history meets the supernatural, where legends refuse to die, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Bell. Stay tuned, because what comes next in the Bell Witch haunting is darker, deadlier, and more mysterious than anything you've heard so far. By the winter of 1820, the Bell family's nightmare had reached its breaking point. For years, the invisible entity that called itself Kate had tormented them with voices, screams, and violent assaults. But now, it seemed to have grown tired of games. Its words turned darker, its laughter colder. It began to promise one thing, that John Bell, the head of the family, would die. Every night, it whispered the same chilling prophecy: "Old Jack Bell will never see another Christmas." What began as a haunting had become an execution. John Bell's health started to crumble in ways that no doctor could explain. His speech slurred. His hands trembled. He often fell into strange, half-conscious states, his face twitching as though he were fighting something unseen. When he tried to pray, his tongue felt heavy in his mouth. When he tried to eat, the food slipped from his hands. The witch mocked him every step of the way. "I'll stop that old fool from eating," she jeered one evening, and the next morning his family found that his jaw had locked tight, as if clamped by invisible hands. Neighbors who came to help found him pale and weak, unable to rise from his bed. The witch seemed to take pleasure in describing his suffering. "He'll never get up again," it whispered from the dark corners of the room. Sometimes its voice came from under the bed, sometimes from the rafters above. Even the Bell children, long used to the haunting, began to panic. They prayed aloud, but the voice only laughed and repeated their words back in a mocking tone, twisting their prayers into curses. The night before John Bell's death, his family noticed a small bottle on the table near his bedside. The liquid inside was thick and dark, unlike anything they had ever seen before. It had a sharp, bitter smell that stung the nose. No one could explain where it had come from. The witch spoke before anyone could question it. "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night," it said, its tone calm, almost proud. "He'll never get up again." Fear spread through the house like a sickness. John Bell's son, John Jr., picked up the bottle and showed it to the family's doctor, who had been staying with them. The doctor took a cautious sniff, frowned, and said, "This isn't medicine." He dipped the end of a quill into the liquid and touched it to the tongue of a cat that was sitting near the fire. Within seconds, the cat convulsed and died. The room fell silent. No one moved. Then, from the darkness, the witch's voice rang out, laughing in triumph. "I told you he was mine." By the next morning, John Bell was dead. His body lay still, his face sunken and pale. The witch's laughter echoed through the house. The family heard it say, "He's gone. I fixed him." The voice even followed them to the funeral. As the coffin was lowered into the cold ground, mourners claimed they could hear a strange songcate's voice again singing cheerfully in the distance. "I sang at his funeral," the entity would later boast to anyone who visited the Bell home. "I killed the old man, and I sang for him." In a time and place where faith and superstition often collided, John Bell's death became the talk of Tennessee. Some called it murder, others called it divine punishment. But all agreed that no human hand had poured that poison. People who had once dismissed the story now whispered it with dread. They spoke of the dark bottle, the dying cat, and the voice that confessed to the crime. The Bell Witch was no longer a haunting, it was a killer. What made this case so haunting wasn't just the death itself, but how deliberate it seemed. The witch had planned it, announced it, and carried it out in full view of witnesses. It didn't strike in a fit of rage. It struck with intent, as if proving that no power human or holy could stop it. This wasn't about simple torment anymore. It was about dominance. The Bell Witch wanted to show that she could end a life at will and walk away laughing. Imagine the scene inside that farmhouse in the final days. The walls were cold. The lamps burned low. Every creak of the floorboards could have been her. The family sat in silence, afraid to speak, afraid to sleep. In the corner, the dying patriarch struggled to breathe. His wife, Lucy, sat beside him, praying under her breath. And somewhere in that dark house, the witch waited, whispering, taunting, watching the last moments of the man she hated most. It wasn't quick, it wasn't merciful, it was slow, deliberate, and cruel like everything else she had done. Even after his death, the witch refused to leave them in peace. On the night of John Bell's burial, she returned with renewed strength. Her voice filled the house again, louder than ever. "I told you I'd do it," she shouted. "Old Jack is gone, and there's nothing you can do." Some claimed they saw flickers of light outside the windows, like lanterns moving through the fields with no one carrying them. Others swore they heard heavy footsteps pacing the halls, long after everyone had gone to bed. It was as if she was celebrating her victory, savoring every ounce of fear she had created. For months after the funeral, the family remained under her shadow. She mocked them for mourning, calling them weak and foolish. When they prayed, she laughed. When they cried, she sang. At times, she recited the exact words John Bell had spoken in his final hours, repeating them in his own voice. The psychological weight of it was unbearable. Neighbors started avoiding the Bell property entirely. Travelers took long detours to stay clear of it. The haunting had claimed more than just one life. It had hollowed out an entire family. The strange liquid, the supposed poison, was never identified. The doctor, unable to analyze it with the limited tools of the time, destroyed the bottle by throwing it into the fire. It flared up with a flash of blue flame and vanished, leaving only a faint, acrid smell behind. To the Bells, that was proof enough that it hadn't come from this world. To others, it was a convenient mystery, impossible to verify but too chilling to ignore. Still, the witch continued to speak of her victory. "He was a bad man," she once said, when asked why she had killed him. "I did what was right." Some took this as a sign that the haunting had moral intent, that the witch was punishing sin. Others saw it as pure malevolence, the act of a spirit that thrived on destruction for its own sake. Whatever the truth, the fact remained. John Bell was dead, and the entity that claimed to have killed him was still very much alive. There's a detail many overlook. The same night John Bell died, his daughter Betsy reportedly heard a voice whisper into her ear as she slept. "It's done," it said. "Now I can rest." For a time, the activity in the house faded. The voices grew faint. The knocks on the walls stopped. But peace never truly returned. Even years later, visitors to the old Bell property spoke of whispers in the wind. A woman's laughter carried over the fields and strange lights moving through the trees. The witch might have vanished from sight, but her legend only grew stronger. What happened to John Bell wasn't an ordinary death. It was a warning of final twisted act in a haunting that had already stretched the limits of human fear. The poison, the confession, the laughter that followed it all told the same story, that the Bell Witch was on T, content with haunting the living. She wanted to prove she could end a life and still speak of it with pride, and in doing so, she etched her name forever into the darkest corners of American folklore. When the Bell Witch finally quieted, it didn't leave impassive, left with a promise. According to the surviving members of the Bell family, the entity announced that it would return in 100 years. That declaration, cold and cryptic, would give birth to one of the most enduring legends in American folklore. The haunting had already left the Bell family shattered. John Bell, the patriarch, was dead under mysterious circumstances. His daughter Betsy was broken, haunted by years of torment and betrayal. Yet the words of the witch lingered, echoing through time like a curse that refused to die. After John Bell's death in 1820, the voice that had tormented them for years slowly faded. It didn't vanish. Suddenly it dwindled, like a storm losing strength. The knocking stopped. The whispering in the walls grew faint. The taunts became less frequent. And then, one night, silence returned to the Bell farm for the first time in years. The family, though relieved, didn't feel free. They had lived too long under its shadow to believe it was truly gone. Even their neighbors, once curious spectators, now avoided the property. The Bell Witch had become a name people feared to speak aloud. In 1828, just as life seemed to settle, the voice returned briefly only for a moment, and only to announce its promise. It would come back in 100 years. The entity claimed it would visit one of John Bell's descendants to continue what it had started. That prophecy spread through the community, turning the Bell Witch story into a legend passed from generation to generation. Over the next century, the legend evolved. The Bell farm became a place of whispered warnings and late-night dares. Travelers avoided it after dark, and locals claimed to hear strange steps knocking, distant laughter, or faint cries coming from the nearby woods. The cave on the property, later known as the Bell Witch Cave, became the center of the myth. People said it was where the spirit had retreated, sleeping beneath the earth, waiting for its promised return. When 1928 arrived, the supposed year of the witch's return, the story flared back into public attention. Newspapers across Tennessee revisited the old accounts, retelling the haunting to a new generation. Journalists, historians, and thrill-seekers visited the area, hoping to witness something supernatural. Some claimed they did. There were reports of voices echoing in the cave, objects moving on their own, and cold spots where the air seemed to vanish. Others dismissed it as folklore, exaggerated by fear and time. One of John Bell's distant descendants, a man named Dr. Charles Bailey Bell, became fascinated by the legend. He published a book in the 1930s titled The Bell Witch, A Mysterious Spirit, in which he claimed that the spirit had indeed returned, though not in the violent form it once took. According to him, the witch's presence was more subtle, strange dreams, whispers in the night, and sensations of being watched. Whether fact or fabrication, his account reignited interest in the story. The Bell Witch's endurance, as a legend, can be traced to more than just fear it. It's about the human need to explain the unexplainable. The story blends elements of faith, superstition, and family tragedy. It's about control and power, belief and hysteria. The Bell family's ordeal touched every one of those themes. They were simple farmers, not con artists or storytellers. Yet they found themselves in the center of a phenomenon that refused to fade. Over time, the Bell Witch legend has become a mirror of American culture. In the 19th century, it was seen as a moral tale warning about pride, secrets, and sin. In the 20th century, it evolved into a ghost story about psychological torment and unseen forces. And today, it's often explored as a case study in mass hysteria, trauma, or spiritual warfare. Each generation finds its own meaning in it, reshaping the story to fit its fears. What makes the Bell Witch unique among hauntings is its personality. Most ghost stories describe aimless spirits or vague presences. The Bell Witch, however, spoke, sang hymns, mocked people, predicted deaths, and seemed to feed on attention. It wasn't passive, it was theatrical. It wanted to be seen, to be feared, to be remembered. That hunger for recognition is what makes the story feel alive even now. Even the landscape carries the curse. The Bell Witch Cave, now a popular site for paranormal tours, draws visitors from around the world. People claim to hear voices in the dark, to feel hands touch them, or to see shadows darting along the cave walls. Some say that anyone who mocks the witch while inside will suffer bad luck afterward. Tour guides report that electronic devices malfunction near certain spots in the cave, as if the atmosphere itself rejects modern intrusion. But beyond the spectacle, there's something deeply human about the legend's persistence. The story of the Bell Witch speaks to the fear of losing control, the idea that something unseen can invade your home, twist your reality, and destroy what you love. It's a fear that transcends time and place. Whether people believe it or not, the emotional truth of that terror is undeniable. Modern paranormal researchers still study the Bell Witch case as a cornerstone of American haunting lore. It's one of the few ghost stories from the early 1800s supported by multiple contemporary accounts, letters, and recorded testimonies. Skeptics argue that it was a combination of psychological stress, family conflict, and suggestibility amplified by isolation. Believers see it as proof of dark forces that prey on human weakness. Both views, in their own way, keep the story alive. There's also the curious detail of how the witch's prophecy about her return was interpreted. When nothing catastrophic happened in 1928, people said she didn't need to appear because she never truly left. They believed the Bell Witch wasn't tied to a specific place or time, but to a state of unrest, a reflection of unresolved human energy. Whenever fear, grief, or injustice gather, they said, she awakens again. That's why stories of the Bell Witch keep resurfacing, not just in Tennessee, but across the American South. Pop culture has only strengthened the legend. The Bell Witch has inspired countless books, documentaries, and films. Some even argue that the Blair Witch Project drew inspiration from it, reimagining the rural haunting for a modern audience. Each retelling adds to her mythology, turning her from a local ghost into an icon of American horror. Yet, despite all the versions, the essence remains the same: a family destroyed by an unseen, intelligent force that defied explanation. Imagine living on that same land today, knowing the story that hangs over it. The winds that sweep across the fields still carry whispers from the past. The creak of an old door, the soft knock on a wall sound becomes a question. Is it the house settling, or is the curse still awake? For the people of Adams, Tennessee, the Bell Witch isn't ancient history. She's folklore made flesh, a story that feels too alive to ever rest. What began as one family's nightmare has become a cornerstone of America's supernatural identity. 2 centuries later, the Bell Witch continues to stand as a reminder of the thin line between belief and fear, and of how a single story can outlive everyone who told it. The witch may have promised to return in 100 years, but in truth, she never had to. She never really left. If you want to hear more stories like this, where history bleeds into horror and truth hides inside the shadows of legend, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Belmoze, because some curses don't fade with time. They only wait for someone new to listen.